we are here for the mythology, right? So we're going to start with Gaia first gave birth to her equal, Uranus, origin of the universe. So I think Gaia is Earth and Uranus. See, they chose to call him by another name that we are not going to say which one, because I know that a lot of people like to make fun of it. So Uranus it is. Origin of the universe. In the beginning was chaos, an open chasm of emptiness, infinitely deep, dark and silent. In his vision of the universe's origin set down in Theogony, the Greek poet Hesiod saw creation as the imposition of a positive reality on this negativity and absence. Key to that reality was the capacity for change. The nothingness of chaos could have continued eternally unaltered, but existence once created brought with it endless cycles. The comings and goings of the seasons, generations of humans, birth and death. These cycles were set in motion by the making of the original division between night and day. Time was now measurable and meaningful. Earth Mother. The first Greek goddess, Gaia, was the earth in its mineral form, its rocks and soil, its mountains and its plains. From its solid and seemingly inert state, it became vibrant with the potential for new life. The first manifestation of that new vitality was Uranus, god of the sky, spontaneously conceived within the womb of the great Earth Mother Gaia, with whom he would subsequently father children. Of course, Greek mythology. Though Gaia's son, Uranus was her equal, Hesiod wrote that she bore him specifically so that he could cover her. Excuse me. While this was a statement of fact, the sky being above the earth, it adds more than a hint of sexuality to the relationship between the earth and heaven. In real life, the Greeks were as horrified at the idea of incest as we are. Its function in their mythology appears to have been to show that all the different aspects of existence are intensely conflicted yet intimately linked. The sky was not simply positioned above the earth. It conjoined with it dynamically and ultimately creatively, just as night did with day, darkness with light, and death with life. So yes, key figures: Gaia, the primordial Earth Mother Goddess, and personification of solid world. Uranus, the sky god, Gaia's spontaneously conceived son. Later, father of the Titans, the Hecaton Charis, the Cyclops, okay, 2 Ks, Cyclops, the Erinyes, Aphrodite, and many other gods and goddesses. Kronos, a titan who castrated his father Uranus, also associated with the harvest. My gosh, this is going to be intense. Kinship and conflict. While creative, these conjunctions inevitably cast opposing principles into a never-ending struggle for supremacy. Hesiod's portrayal of primal sexual relations was essentially violent. Male and female forces as complementary but also competing. It was far from an idealized worldview, and the depiction of Uranus was even more extreme. The despotic patriarch would brook no rival, not even his own children. Uranus's jealousy of his sons and daughters was such that at each birth he took them away and stowed each one in some hidden recess of the earth, which was actually his wife's body. He did this to establish his ownership of Gaia. As I said, intense. So we have here the sky god Uranus is depicted as a benign father with offsprings draped around him in a wood engraving after a fresco by the Prussian artist Carl Friedrich Schinkel. Here we have it. Anyway, okay, so he did this to establish his ownership of Gaia. That's what we read last. Her sexual attentions had to be entirely and eternally available to him, so their offsprings could not be allowed to see the light of day. Successive infants were consigned to subterranean depths. First came the 12 Titans, the sisters Theia, Mnemosyne, Phoebe, Themis, Thetis, and Rhea, and their brothers Oceanus, Coes, Crius, Hyperion, Iapetus, and Cronus. Each, in his and her turn, was rammed into some convenient crack or crevice of the earth and left there trapped. After the Titans came three giant brothers, the Cyclops, each of whom had a single eye. But why isn't it with C? Maybe that's like a official new naming or something. Okay. Cyclops, each of whom had a single eye and at the center of his forehead. Like their siblings, they were consigned at birth to be buried in the heart of the earth. Then came three more giants of even greater strength, the Hecatocheires, whose name names means 100-handed in Greek. Okay, Hekaton. Right. Each was also said to have 50 heads, making them formidable. They too were incarcerated by Uranus deep inside the earth. The upstart sun. As for Gaia, the Earth Mother, felt both physically burdened by the number of infant bodies literally forced back inside her, and also deeply upset by the attempted suppression of her children. Finally, she rebelled and appealed to her sons for help. She secretly made a sickle out of adamant, by legend an unbreakable mineral, and gave it to Cronos. The next time Uranus spread himself over her, attempting to force her into intercourse, Cronos leaped out from his hiding place to aid his mother, wielding his sickle and sickle, S-E-C-K-L-E, sickle. And with one fell swoop, he sliced off his father's genitals. Excuse me, this is really, really intense. But like, my question is, if she is the original goddess, right? I mean, I was going to say, why didn't she like punish Uranus for being whatever he was being to her, right? But okay, they mentioned that she made him to be equal to her, so I guess they were of equal strength. Anyway, so we got that going. It was the ultimate patriarchal nightmare. The father not just supplanted by his son, but castrated by him. I'm not sure if YouTube is going to allow me to include all these words. With the connivance of his wife. Even now, however, Uranus's potency was not quite spent. The splashes of blood and other bodily fluids that flew from his wound sowed spirit life whenever they landed, bringing into being a vast assortment of newborn nymphs and giants, good and bad. The Erinyes, 3 baleful sisters, better known to us now as the Furies, were angry and avenging spirits. Aphrodite was a deity of a very different kind. Where Uranus's wound-spattered landed in the ocean, this most beautiful of goddesses was born. She stepped from the waves, bringing with her all the delights of erotic love. Okay, so I'm already learning a lot of things in a very intense way. Let's say it like that. But I really did not know that Aphrodite from the Olympian gods, she was the one that was first to be created. Interesting. A white foam arose where the immortal skin touched water. Amidst the waves, a beautiful maiden took form. Titans of all trades. When Cronos had finally freed his brothers and sisters from captivity in the earth, the Titans were to serve a twofold mythic function. First, they were living, breathing, loving, and fighting personalities. Each of them symbolized a different aspect of existence, so that collectively they represented a way of ordering and enriching the world. The eldest daughter, Mnemosyne, for instance, stood for the faculty of memory and all it brought with it in terms of history, culture, and heritage. Later, having oh, no, absolutely not. Later, having lain with her nephew Zeus, she would give birth to the 9 Muses, divine patronesses of scientific study, historic study, poetry, and performing arts. My God, who did Zeus not sleep with? Seriously. Thetis, who married her brother Oceanus, went on to bear him 3,000 sons, all river gods, and as many daughters. 3,000 sons. And as many daughters, the Oceanids, who were nymphs of springs, rivers, lakes, and seas. Her younger sister, Thea, too, took a brother, Hyperion, for her husband. She bore him Helios, the sun, and his sister Eos, goddess of dawn. Helios and Eos had a sister, Selene, who was a goddess of the moon, though her aunt Phoebe, sister of Thetis, Nemesis, and Thea, also had lunar associations. Themis, the youngest female Titan, was associated with reason, justice, and with the orderly conduct of existence in the universe. Like her sister Mnemosyne, she would for a time become consort to her nephew Zeus. I mean, seriously, what did I just say? Of their children, the hours would oversee the measurement and passage of the seasons and of time. Another daughter, Nemesis, took her mother's association with justice to violent extremes. As her name suggests, she became notorious as the personification of punishment and divine retribution. The name of the youngest male Titan, Iapetus, comes from iapto, a Greek word meaning wound or pierce. The implication of this translation have long been debated. Ancient poets seem to have been unsure whether he was given this name because he sustained an injury or because he made the weapon that inflicted it. Meanwhile, in classical literature, Iapetus appears both as a deity of mortality and of skill in crafts. Patricidal patriarch. Artists in ancient Greece almost invariably represented Kronos carrying a sickle, an emblem of his attack upon his father. The sickle also has more mundane and practical associations. Kronos came to be seen as the godly guarantor of a successful harvest. The connection between these two functions, the idea that one generation had effectively to be destroyed for its successor to survive and thrive, took an early hold on the Greek consciousness. Kronos, having killed his father, now replaced him as the head of the household. He then married his sister Rhea and began to produce children on his own. Much like his father, Kronos would soon comfort the idea that human life can only advance through intergenerational struggle. This theme runs through the Greek mythological tradition and is most notoriously associated with the story of King Oedipus. And we have all the gods. So it's started with Gaia, right? She was the initial being, and then she created Uranus, and then they had all these main titans. Yes, so I guess they had their own intertwining, but the information that we have here is that of Kronos and Rhea. Again, Kronos that became the head of household, and they produced 6 gods: Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, and Zeus. So those are other Olympian gods. Aside from Aphrodite, as we just learned, she was first one. Rhea swaddled up a stone and passed it to Kronos to swallow the Olympian gods. Again, intense. So, this chapter is the Olympian gods. Kronos, Titan son of the earth goddess Gaia and the sky god Uranus, proved every bit as possessive a patriarch as his father has been. After just one generation, a dismal pattern of godly conduct was emerging. Just as Uranus had dominated Gaia, Kronos required his wife and sister Rhea to be exclusively and endlessly available to him in order to meet his sexual needs. I mean, seriously, what is wrong with these gods? Chill. Can you just chill? No one else, least of all his children, would be allowed to compete for her attention. Having deposed his own father to become king of the Titans, Kronos knew how dangerous it was to let a child grow in envy and rage. I mean, if you are behaving like that, what are you expecting? No, but seriously. Determined that no one should pose such a threat to him, Kronos ensured that the children Rhea bore him were destroyed just as quickly as they were conceived. Seriously. Why? Why would you conceive if then you would destroy them right after? My gosh, didn't I say this was going to be intense? As soon as she gave birth to a new baby, he would swallow it whole. Hestia, the first child that Rhea bore, was gone in a single gulp before her mother could even cradle her in her arms. Another daughter, Demeter, soon followed. She too was swallowed promptly. Hera, the third daughter, went the same way, and Kronos' sons fared no better. First came Hades, bolted down before he could utter his first helpless cry, swiftly followed by the next son, Poseidon, who met the same fate. The despairing Rhea finally turned to her mother, the elderly Gaia, and her neutered father, Uranus, for help. Together they hatched a devious plan to save their daughter's next child. Switched with a stone. Rhea followed her parents' advice. As soon as she had given birth to Zeus, the last of her sons, and before his father Cronos had a chance to see him, she hid the baby away. Then she wrapped a stone in swaddling clothes and handed it to her unsuspecting husband in place of the infant. Cronos, in his rapacious greed, did not even look at the bundle before he tipped back his head, opened his mouth wide, and dropped it in. The baby tumbled straight down into his stomach, ready to join the jostling crowd of children already there. Unknown to Cronos, they had all survived in the deep darkness of his belly. There they grew in size and resentment. Of course. So, for those who missed whatever is happening, Cronos castrates and kills. No, but excuse me, we just read that he was still alive. Anyway, his cruel father, Uranus, Cronos becomes a cruel father in his turn. Tricked by Rhea, he misses Zeus, who comes back to kill him. Cronos eats his children to prevent them from supplanting him. What a great plan. Great plan. You're doing great, sweetie. Okay, so brought up in safety. Next. Meanwhile, Rhea, on the recommendation of the child's grandmother, Gaia, spirited the infant Zeus away, carrying him across the sea to the fertile island of Crete. There, in a concealed cave on the thickly wooded slopes of Mount Ida, now known as Psiloritis, the highest mountain of Crete. Rhea left her son in the cave of a warlike tribe called the Corites. They in turn gave the baby to a nymph named Amalthea in some sources, who nursed Zeus in secret. According to Hesiod, the nymph was frightened that Cronos, thanks to his universal authority over the earth, sea, and sky, would be able to see where his son was being hidden. To prevent Cronos from fighting him, she hung Zeus from a rope that dangled between the earth and the heavens, but was in neither one of realm nor the other. Adamanthea cared for Zeus and nursed him with milk from a herd of goats that grazed nearby. Whenever the baby gurgled, squealed, or cried, the Corites danced and chanted to disguise the sound. As a result, Cronos was completely unaware that his younger son was still alive. Zeus seeks his father. In no time at all, it seemed, Zeus grew to manhood. He was hungry for revenge against his cruel father. Yet, if Zeus was ever to emerge from hiding, some sort of showdown between them would be inevitable. Cronos could not afford to let a potential usurper live. If he became aware of Zeus' existence, he would view his son only as a threat to his power. Cronos' fear of being usurped was fully justified. When he finally met his son, whom he believed to be dead, he was forced to yield to Zeus in the most brutal way. Zeus simply turned up one day and, with the help of his grandmother, Gaia, ambushed his father. He kicked Kronos violently in the stomach and forced his father to vomit up the contents of his stomach. First to emerge was the stone Kronos had swallowed, believing it to be the infant Zeus. The young god took this stone and set it upright in the earth as a monument to Kronos' cruelty, and a symbol of his triumph over the wicked god. Zeus placed the stone at the omphalos, or navel, of the Greek ancient world at Delphi, in the very center of Greece. In future ages, the stone would become a shrine renowned for its oracle. Pilgrims would visit it to seek the guidance of the priestess or sibyl regarding their personal problems, and the sibyl would provide them messages of wisdom which were said to come directly from the gods. Great deities disgorged. After vomiting up the stone, Kronos began to disgorge his offsprings. One by one, Zeus's elder brothers and sisters came out of their father's mouth, no longer babies now, but fully grown. Once reborn, they became the Olympian gods and were revered for their powers. Soon after their rebirth, the sons and daughters of Kronos went to war with the mighty Titans for control of the cosmos. After their victory, the gods set up their seat of power on Mount Olympus and drew lots to decide who would take which role in ruling the universe. The three sons of Kronos divided the cosmos up between them. One would take control of the sky, another would have the sea, and the third would preside over the underworld. Zeus, whose weapon of choice was the thunderbolt, became ruler of the sky and leader of all the Olympian gods. Hades, his first son to be born, and the last to be regurgitated. My gosh, this is seriously. Became lord of the underworld. His name came to stand for both the deity and his unseen realm, where souls go after death. Hades was not happy to have been allocated to this dismal domain, but there was nothing he could do about it. Meanwhile, Poseidon, who had been the tiniest baby, became the almighty Earth Shaker, the god of the sea in all its awesome power. Earth Shaker? Disparate goddesses. The three female children of Kronos also had an important role to play. Hestia, goddess of the hearth. Wait, what? No, it is hearth. What is hearth? Anyway, ruled over people's domestic life. As goddess of the harvest, Demeter was a life giver to the worshippers who relied on her annual bounty. Seriously, why is my English not Englishing anymore? She proved a fickle protagonist, however, ready not just to cross swords with her siblings, but to withhold favors from humankind at any perceived slight. Hera's role was more prominent than that of her sisters. and she became the foremost female deity following her marriage to her brother Zeus. To her great dismay, however, Hera never quite received the recognition and honors she expected as the queen of the gods. As the goddess of women and marriage, Hera was supposed to represent the archetypal wedded state, but she became known for her marital troubles. I mean, it's not her fault that Zeus was whatever he was. Nor was Hera the goddess who inspired man's passions. While Hera was portrayed as a wifely figure, Aphrodite was the goddess associated with feminine beauty. Sexuality, and erotic pleasures. The Greeks had these two different deities for what in ancient times were considered two separate spheres of affection. One deity represented marital love, the other romantic and erotic love. While this distinction may now be alien to many people, in most cultures and at most times in history, the majority of marriages were arranged as transactions for the management and transmissions of property and land. The idea of companionate marriage, in which the love between a husband and wife is the driving factor, is a relatively modern convention. So, I will read a bit more in a bit, but I wanted to mention something. This is a repeating story with children killing, children gods killing their original parents. There's a very interesting Mesopotamian myth. I can't remember now specifically the names, but there also was again a mother goddess. She was the original supreme primordial being. She did create a husband to herself, and then they had children, and then because supposedly she was very much chaotic, and again this overpowering being, all the other gods, her children and her husband as well, feared her very much. Again, I don't know how mean, chaotic, dark, and all of that she was. Usually the stories are written by the winners, so the winners will say that they had to, basically they will justify their actions because, again, the entity that they were fighting was mean and this awful, awful thing. Anyway, I don't know, I wasn't there, and also this is mythology, so there we go. But basically all the children gave their magic strength to one of the gods, and then this god fought against this primordial mother. And I do believe that, they said she was killed, but she was actually never killed. She just potentially went to like a sleep or like a coma kind of state. So again, he would then be the master of all the gods, Again, a very similar story to the one that we just read. But anyway, also related to the last part of marriages being arranged and being separated, like the marital love being different from like romantic love. Anyway, I have a few comments on that, but maybe, I will leave them for some other time. Anyway, the Dodecation. Aphrodite was the only member of the first generation of Olympians who was not a child of Cronus and Rhea. See? I learned that today. Some accounts suggest that she was the daughter of Zeus, but Hesiod, Pausians, and Ovid all describe her as Cronus' sister, who was born from sea foam after the castration of Orinus. Despite being the same generation as Cronus and Rhea, she was always considered an Olympian rather than a Titan, and one of the gods and goddesses who eventually made up the Dodecation, the 12 most important Olympians in the Greek pantheon. The Dodecation included Zeus, Demeter, Hera, Poseidon, and Aphrodite from the first generation of Olympians. The earth goddess Hestia was not among them, as she later chose to live on earth to avoid her siblings' squabbles. She was the smart one. Hades, similarly, was not included because he resided permanently in the underworld. After the war between the gods and the Titans established the Olympians as rulers of the cosmos, the first generation of gods went on to have many children. Many of gods and other figures in Greek mythology were children of Zeus. Of course, he wouldn't stop. Seriously. Of the second generation of gods, several joined the Dodecation and were powerful deities in their own right. The gods Apollo, Ares, Dionysus, Hephaestus, and Hermes all joined the ranks of Zeus and his siblings on Mount Olympus, and as did the goddesses Artemis and Athena. The Dodecation met as a council to discuss matters in their ruling of the cosmos, and Dionysus, god of wine, attained his seat at the table only after Hestia left Olympus to reside on earth. The Olympian gods were all too human in their personalities, and often lacked the lofty transcendence of the supreme beings in the later religions. In a dramatic soap opera of fierce rivalries and petty spans, their actions were influenced not by a desire to work for the good of humankind, but by their own selfish desires and whims. The Greeks, therefore, did not worship the gods by attempting to emulate them, instead treating them as they might be a powerful human ruler, by offering sacrifices and celebrating the deities at regular festivals. At its core, this was a system of exchange. People offered gifts to the gods in the hope that the gods would give them what they asked for. The gods often rewarded mortals who treated them well and showed them the appropriate deference and respect. Zeus and his siblings could be needlessly cruel and were often subject to jealousies and petty fights. His brothers Poseidon and Hades often used humans as pawns in these squabbles, which usually stemmed from a reluctance to accept the supreme god's authority as unquestionable. Still more reluctant was his sister Demeter, a strong-willed deity in her own right. After she was pursued and raped by Poseidon and Hades abducted her daughter Persephone, Demeter wreaked havoc across the world. I mean, reasonably so. Seriously. We're gonna make it. We're gonna make it out of here. I promise. Infidelity, too, was a major theme in all Greek myths, not just in the affairs and assaults committed by Zeus that riled the jealous Hera. I mean, seriously, who put him in charge? Who put a piece of trash, with the lack of better word, because I will be demonetized, in charge? Although something that I really like in Greek mythology is the fact that they depicted gods as not this kind of like flawless being, almighty, all righteous, all whatever. No, they each had their own domain, their own powers, their own I don't know, goods, like, because I can see too many good things, good character things from these deities, especially the male one. But however, nevertheless, since they showed so many negative sides of gods, I think it is a bit more relatable, and like it's a type of, I mean, this was the religion at the time, right? Although again, I can't say that the religion directly translated into that term of importance that people consider nowadays, or a bit earlier, still later than Greeks. Again, it's a relatable type of situation, right? So even though gods are supreme and they do have like a additional extra situation going for them, they were not like, I'm gonna punish you because you did this, this and that. Like, how could a god who was doing things that are equally or even worse, you know, there was no like a sin thing, there was no that like puritanical, you know what, I'm gonna stop here, right here. Anyway, twixt God and morals. Despite their power, in many ways, Greek deities appear to have and an intermediate status hovering somewhere between the spiritual and the real. Their attributes reflect the countless aspects of Greek everyday life in which the gods played an implicit part. All the gods had specific areas of influence, such as Zeus and Athena, who were among the theoi agoraioi, gods of the agora, and the marketplace and people's assembly. Both Zeus and the goddess Hestia were also gods of the home. Theoi, Thesioi. Hestia, Dionysus, and Aphrodite were among the Theoi, Ditioi, who presided over feasts and banquets. My voice is almost failing me, so I think it is almost time to wrap it up. Where was I? Yes, feasts and banquets. The gods themselves also needed sustenance. According to Greek tradition, they lived on a diet of nectar and ambrosia, carried up Mount Olympus by doves. To later belief system, the notion that deities needed material sustenance seemed at odds with their divinity. Ancient Greek authorities, however, agreed on the importance of this nourishment for the gods to empower and sustain them. We have a painting and these statues of the Olympian gods, I would assume. Right, and here we have the 12 Olympians. Let me go through them and we'll end there. So we have Aphrodite, which was the first one. The goddess of love and beauty was often shown with a scepter, myrtle, and dove. So symbols of Aphrodite was scepter, myrtle, and dove. Apollo was an archer, but also played the lyre, while the laurel symbolized his love for Daphne. I have a video about that story. It's a video of me role-playing as Greek goddess. I know. Amazing. Anyway, but symbols for Apollo were bow, lyre, and laurel. So laurel, Daphne was transformed into a laurel tree, and Apollo started to wear a crown made of laurel tree. And he also used his magic to transform laurel tree into an evergreen, so it would never die, basically. And that's why, or that's where the laurel crown for all the, Greek emperors, Roman, borrowed that afterwards, is coming from. Ares was the bloodthirsty god of war. His love of arms was usually represented by a spear, and that is his symbol. Artemis, the hunting goddess, and Apollo's twin. Interesting. I did not know that. So Artemis was Apollo's twin sister. Anyway, was shown with a bow and her sacred deer. Again, a bow and a deer is the symbol, and she and Apollo share the bow symbol situation. I guess that's the twin thing that they got. Anyway, Athena, goddess of wisdom, bore the Aegis shield. Aegis shield. Her bird was the owl, her tree the olive tree. Yes, so Aegis shield, the owl, and olive. Owl is one of the most represented things in both Greek and Roman. So this was important for them. Demeter, the scepter-wielding harvest goddess, carried a torch in a bid to find her daughter. Right. So the symbols for Demeter is scepter, torch, and grain. Dionysus, god of wine, was crowned with ivy and bore a thyrsos. Excuse me. What? Thyrsos, a symbol of pleasure. Okay. So we have grape wine, ivy, and thyrsos, which appears to be you know what? Whatever. It's like a I'm gonna tickle you. Anyway, Hephaestus was the god of smiths, craftsmen, and fire. His axe was never far from his side, and his symbol is the axe. Hera, Zeus' queen, carried a scepter and wore a regal crown. Her bird was the peacock. Scepter, diadem, and peacock are the symbols for Hera. Hermes, the god's messenger, wore winged boots and carried a caduceus, a magical staff. I mean, it's a well-known symbol. Let me see if I can show you. Right there. I feel like it's related to medicine mostly nowadays. In between other things, Poseidon, the sea god, wielded a trident to shake the earth. Bulls and horses were sacred to him. So, trident, bull, and horse were the symbols for Poseidon. And our favorite, Zeus. The supreme god tossed thunderbolts at foes. The eagle was his bird, the oak his tree. So, the symbol for Zeus were thunderbolt, eagle, and oak. He bound cunning Prometheus in unescapable feathers. Prometheus helps mankind. Zeus's victory in the war with the Titans had been hard won, but decisive. He and his brothers held unchallenged sway over the heavens, earth, and sea. The usurper of usurper, he had seized supremacy by dethroning Cronus, who had himself toppled the tyrant Orinus. No ruler could afford to become complacent, however seemingly unassailable their position, and a challenge to the authority of Zeus was fast approaching. Spirit of rebellion. Prometheus, a young titan and therefore a survivor of the old regime, was the son of Iapetus and Clymene, celebrated for quick intelligence, dexterity, and skills. Prometheus's very name meant thinking ahead. He was an inventor and a strategist. Different sources disagree on the precise part Prometheus played in the continuing struggle between Zeus and his subjects. Despite this, all sources regard him as a central part of the conflict. Self-confident in his cleverness, Prometheus was independent-minded, irreverent, and defiant. His contempt for Zeus's authority was all too clear. Worse still, he appeared to pass on this rebellious spirit to Zeus's human subjects. From clay to stone. According to Apollodorus' library, Prometheus was the creator of humanity, shaping the first man and woman from moist clay. This first race of humans walked the earth from only a single generation before being swept away by an angry Zeus in a worldwide flood. Prometheus's human son Deucalion and his wife Pyrrha were the only survivors. Typically, Prometheus had outmaneuvered Zeus, prompting his son and his daughter-in-law to save themselves by building a floating wooden chest in which to ride out of deluge. Deucalion survived the great flood and its aftermath by showing more tact than his father. He thanked Zeus for letting him and Pyrrha live, built an altar, and offered sacrifice. Zeus was so pleased to see this submissive spirit that he not only allowed Deucalion and Pyrrha to go on living, but told Deucalion how he could recreate humanity. He and his wife were told to pick up stones and throw them backwards over their heads. They did so, and whenever Deucalion's stone landed, the bodies of living men immediately took form. Where Pyrrha's came to rest, women sprang out of the ground. A trick backfires. Unlike Apollodorus, Hesiod's genealogy incorporated mortal humans almost from the beginning, though he said little about their origins. They were mentioned as existing during the reign of Cronus, but only incidentally, emerging into the foreground only in the age of the Olympian gods. When Zeus summoned humans for a meeting on a sort of sacrifice they would have to offer him, Prometheus intervened on their behalf, wrapping some choice beef inside an ugly ox hide and a bundle of bones inside some of the most delicious meat. He offered Zeus the choice of which sacrifices should be made to him. Thenceforth, Zeus appeared to have fallen for the trick, asking for the outwardly appealing bag of bones. The Hesiod, hence the king of the gods, may have chosen this deliberately, to have an excuse for hating humans. Either way, Zeus was enraged. Far from easing people's plight as he had intended, Prometheus's cunning made them victims of Zeus's rage. The angry god hid the secret of fire from his human subjects. This not only deprived them of warmth and comfort, but also hindered human progress. Out in the cold. Without fire or the technologies it makes possible, mortals existed in a miserable state of subsistence. They foraged for food in darkness, damp and cold, with only animal skins for clothes, surviving on raw food, roots, berries, and fruits when they were in season, and uncooked carrion. They used twigs and rudimentary tools and old bones for weaponry, in what could scarcely be qualified even as a primitive existence. As they fought a daily battle to stave off starvation, any possibility of shaping their wider destiny was unthinkable. Stolen fire. Prometheus came to humanity's rescue. He took some glowing embers from a blaze built by the gods high up on Mount Olympus, and, secreting this fire inside a hollow fennel stalk, he carried it down to the little encampments where mortal men and women shivered on the plains below. Soon, visible from afar, fires twinkled across the length and breadth of the peopled world. In that moment, human life was instantly and permanently transformed. Heat, warmth, light, and safety from predatory beasts was just the start. In no time and at all, mankind began to thrive, smelting metal, fashioning the finest jewelry and the strongest tools, blacksmithing all kinds of weapons, from hoes and hammers to spears and swords. Each new innovation opened the way to others, and suddenly humanity was progressing at a breakneck pace. Zeus was enraged by Prometheus's theft of fire. Not only had he been defied in the most public way, but his power over humanity had been significantly weakened. Zeus decided that Prometheus deserved an eternal and painful punishment. He had the thief seized by his henchmen, Bia, violence, and Kratos, power, and carried to a high mountain peak. Here, with the help of Hephaestus, the blacksmith god, they chained Prometheus to a rock. An eagle flew down, tore at his abdomen, then pulled out the living, pulsing liver and gorged on it. Despite the agony of this torture, it was no more than a beginning for the rebellious Titan. Each night his internal organs and his skin grew back, ready to be attacked afresh by the eagle the next day. For centuries, Prometheus was tied to the rock. He was finally rescued from this torment by Heracles, who found him while hunting for the elusive apples of the Hesperides. Prometheus would only give Heracles the apple's location after he killed the eagle and set Prometheus free. Prometheus was not the only one punished for stealing fire from the gods. Zeus also inflicted his rage upon humankind, instructing Hephaestus to create the woman Pandora to punish the humans by bringing them hardship, war, and death. And so it takes us to the next chapter, which is about Pandora. Her impulse introduced sorrow and mischief to the lives of men. Pandora's box. In Hesiod's account of humanity's mythic origins, works, and days, man was first created alone, with no female mate to accompany him on his journey through the world. Woman would make her first appearance not as a man's helpmate or partner, but as his punishment. A jealous god. When the Titan Prometheus stole fire from the gods, he did much to empower humanity at high personal cost. In an existence that had been largely trouble-free, humanity to whom he gave the gift of fire continued to thrive and prosper. In punishment, however, Prometheus would be held captive and tortured internally at the hands of Zeus, who was a jealous and grudging deity. Far from rejoicing in man's improving fortunes, the god felt threatened by humanity's growing confidence. Zeus concluded that in order to correct the balance between divine and human power, some great calamity in the world was required. That calamity was a woman. On Zeus's orders, the blacksmith and the fire god Hephaestus set to work, shaping soft clay into a female mate for a man, gilding the lily. The other Olympians then added their own contributions to the woman's makeup. Aphrodite gave her beauty and attractiveness. Athena gave her skill of sewing. Hera gave her curiosity, and so on. Hermes, the god's messenger, gave woman the power of speech to help her communicate. But he also gave her the dangerous gift of guile. This new woman was enchanting in her beauty, seductive in her softness, inspiring in her smile, and soothing in her gentleness. In light of these traits, she was given a name, Pandora, literally meaning all gifts. Her name alone would have caused Prometheus concern. He had previously warned his brother Epimetheus not to accept any offerings from Zeus in case it unleashed some evil thing for mortal man. However, due to the punishment of Prometheus, Epimetheus had been left in charge in the world of man, whereas Prometheus's name meant thinking ahead or foresight, Epimetheus's meant thinking after. He was gullible and did not stop to think when Zeus's messenger, Hermes, presented him with Pandora as a goodwill present to humanity from Zeus. Nor did he give a second glance to the present that she herself brought with her, a pithos or ceramic jar, usually reimagined as a richly ornamented box in modern retellings. The all-gifted girl was both a gift and a giver. Fatal curiosity. There was nothing inherently evil about Pandora, although she had been warned against opening the python. It was her innocent curiosity, itself a characteristic given by Hera, that led to her downfall. When she could not resist peeping inside the jar, she pulled back the lid. All the ills and misfortunes of the world flew out. Hunger, sickness, loss, loneliness, and death. Horrified, Pandora hastily pushed the lid back on, just in time to prevent Hope from escaping. With Hope, the world could still preserve, despite the adversity that the jealous Zeus had inflicted on the mankind. So there we go. Our girl Pandora did a bit of a mess. But I think it is curious that the woman was created to be, again, a troublemaker and was kind of independently created with much more gifts from all the gods, even though some of them, again, might not be considered gifts, but are like that. Anyway, next we have a very big chapter that deserves its own big introducing, and that is Zeus had many women, both mortal and immortal. The many affairs of Zeus. The sexual adventures of Zeus, the king of gods, made up a significant stand of ancient Greek mythology. Without Zeus's many infidelities, the myth suggests that knowledge and artistic expression of any kind, poetry, music, drama, or works of art, would not exist. One of Zeus's first affairs was with Mnemosyne, the Titan goddess of memory. After he slept with her on 9 consecutive nights, 9 daughters were born, collectively known as the Muses. Each of these daughters became responsible for inspiring mortals in a particular area of artistic endeavor. Calliope inspired epic poetry, Clio history, Euterpe lyrics and poetry and songs, Erato love poetry, and Polyhymnia sacred poetry. Melpomene became responsible for inspiring tragic drama. Thalia took charge of comedy and pastoral poetry. Terpsichore inspired dance, and Urania astronomy. All through the classical period, musicians and poets called on the Muses for assistance as they worked. "Blessed is he whom the Muses love," said the Greek poet Hesiod, after invoking their help in Theogony, his poem about the genealogy of the gods. With the inspiration of the Muses, Hesiod said musicians and poets could relieve a suffering mind of its cares. Hera and the Cuckoo. Zeus's instinct for trickery was an integral part of his character and informed all of his erotic exploits. He had assumed the form of a mortal, a handsome shepherd, to seduce Mnemosyne, and many of his other love affairs involved similar sorts of shape-shifting. Hera, Zeus's wife, had also been won this way. The notoriously formidable goddess had dismissed Zeus disdainfully when he had first approached her, forcing him to take deceptive measures to win her affections. First he summoned a thunderstorm. Then he stood outside her window and took on the form of Fledgling Cuckoo, its expression helpless and its feathers ruffled up as if chilled and battered by the wind-blown hail. Hera could not bear to see this tiny creature suffering. That is such a low-hanging fruit, Zeus, even for you. She cupped the cuckoo in her hand and placed it inside her dress against her bosom so that it could get warm. At this point, Zeus assumed his normal, quasi-human form and seduced her. The conquest of Hera was not the only time Zeus took the form of a bird. Zeus took on the shape of the swan in order to seduce the Spartan princess Leda. As with Hera, he took advantage of his victim's compassion. Apparently fleeing from an attacking eagle, he fell into her arms. But when she cradled him protectively, Zeus raped her. In the case of the Theban princess Semele, his choice of species, a raptor, clearly signaled his predatory intentions. Taking the form of an eagle, his royal emblem, he visited Semele and made her pregnant. Dionysus, god of wine and festivity, was the result of their union. Ruined innocence. Zeus's conquest of Alcmene, a mortal princess with whom he fathered Heracles, was more sinister. Excuse me, but more sinister than what we heard? Okay, I guess. Let's see. Alcmene was a paragon of beauty, charm, and wisdom. She was betrothed to Amphitryon, the son of the Theban general. Zeus assumed his disguise to approach Alcmene while her fiancé was away avenging the deaths of her brothers. King Acrisius of Argos was particularly anxious to keep his only daughter, Danae, chaste. He had been warned by an oracle that she was destined to bear a son who would one day slay him. To avoid this fate, he placed her in a cell so that no one could come near her. However, Zeus took the form of a shower of gold to pour himself through the prison skylight. The child of this encounter, Perseus, would later unwittingly cause her father's death. Zeus as a beast. Despite her name, Europa was a child of Asia, a princess from Phoenicia, a region covering parts of Israel, Syria, and Lebanon. Smitten by her charms, Zeus took on the form of a fine white bull and mingled among her father's cattle. Picking flowers, Europa noticed the new bull and was struck by its beauty and its seeming gentleness. When she drew near to pet it, the bull lay down and she climbed onto his back. Suddenly the bull leapt up and sped away across the fields and over the sea, while the terrified girl clung on for dear life. The bull only stopped when it reached the island of Crete, where Zeus at last revealed himself and bedded his young victim. Zeus rewarded Europa by making her Crete's first queen. In time, she gave birth to Minos, the island's first king. Scholars think the story of Europa may have originated in Crete, where the cult of the bull also produced the story of Theseus and the Minotaur. For his assault on Antiope, the daughter of Asopus, a river god from Attica in central Greece, Zeus took the shape of a satyr, a half-man, half-goat who roamed the wild woods. Usually associated with the idea of lechery, satyrs were often depicted with erections in ancient art. Zeus has disguised his identity but not his lust. My gosh. Hiding from Hera. In some stories, it was Zeus's quarry who had to take a different shape. In the case of Io, the daughter of the king of Argos, and a priestess in a temple of Zeus's wife Hera, Zeus transformed himself into a cloud to make his approach and conceal it from the watchful Hera. Once he had raped Io, he turned her into a beautiful white heifer to hide her from his wife. Hera saw through the trick and asked if she could have the heifer as a gift. Zeus had no option but to agree. Hera consigned Io to the care of the 100-eyed giant Argos to watch over. Maddened with frustration, Zeus sent his son Hermes to slay the all-seeing herdsman. The divine messenger blinded Argus with a touch from his Kerykeion or staff. As the giant lay there dead, Hermes collected up his 100 eyes and set them in a peacock's tail. The bird was sacred to Hera from that time on. If Zeus thought the way was now clear for him to pursue Io, he was wrong. Hera sent a fly to attack her. Buzzing about and biting her again and again, the insect put Io to flight and chased her across the earth. Io was never to find rest. My gosh, but didn't the fly die eventually? Or is it like a magic fly that never dies? My gosh, that's a plague that we don't want to have. We don't want to put it into the universe. The birth of Athena. Metis, Zeus's cousin, and in some accounts his first wife, wrought her own transformation in a bid to shake off Zeus's pursuit. Metis assumed a series of different forms to avoid him, but Zeus eventually succeeded in catching her and making her pregnant. I am so sick of Zeus. So sick. Nevertheless, Zeus was worried. Metis was renowned for her sharp intellect and willingness, and an oracle had told him that Metis was destined to bear a child who matched her strength and cunning. Zeus, a usurper who had overthrown his own father, was on his guard against this child. Just before Metis was due to give birth, Zeus challenged her to a shape-shifting match. She was vain enough to agree. When Zeus told her that he did not believe she could transform herself into a tiny fly, she promptly did, and was swallowed by a triumphant Zeus. It was a clever trick, but it did not succeed. When Zeus developed an unbearable headache, the Titan god Prometheus swung an axe at his head, splitting it wide open. Out from the wound sprang Athena, the goddess of war and wisdom, in a full suit of armor. She became one of the most important deities on Olympus and the patron goddess of the powerful city-state of Athens. I did know that Athena was Zeus's daughter, but clearly that was not the story that I was imagining behind. Both transformed. In some stories, both predator and prey underwent changes. Zeus again disguised himself as an eagle to pursue Asteria, the Titan goddess of shooting stars. She transformed into another bird, the timid quail, in a desperate bid to escape and finally dived into the sea. There she changed her shape again and was preserved forever as an island, later variously identified as Delos or Ortygia in Syracuse, Sicily. It was on this island that the Asteria's younger sister Leto was to find sanctuary some years later, after she too caught the lecherous eye of Zeus. Lecherous? Here she gave birth to twins, Apollo, the god of the sun and poetry, prophecy and healing, and the divine huntress Artemis, goddess of the moon. Okay, so all these gods are a result of Zeus's adventures. Anyway, mythology relates scores of Zeus's exploits, highlighting a sexual appetite that apparently drew little censure of ancient Greece. Despite his countless acts of rape, deception, and infidelity, the king of the gods was not seen as a villain. In his dialogue, Euthyphro, the ancient Greek philosopher Plato declared, "Do not men regard Zeus as the best and the most righteous of the gods?" Okay, thank goodness we are changing our subject to Hades. Not that he is much better than Zeus, but fingers crossed. Mighty Hades, who dwells in houses beneath the earth, Hades and the underworld. While Zeus ruled over the skies and Poseidon over the seas, their brother Hades guarded his subject souls in the underworld, the kingdom that bore his name, where mortal humans went when they died. 5 dark rivers mark the boundaries of Hades' kingdom. Acheron was the river of sadness, Cocytus of mourning, Lethe was the river of forgetfulness, and Phlegethon, an impassable river of fire. The river Styx marked the main border between Earth and the underworld. The dead queued on one side of the river and paid the ferryman Charon with a coin to grant them passage into Hades. Because of this relief, the ancient Greeks were sometimes buried with a coin in their mouth, known as Charon's opal. On the other side of the river lay a dark and dismal realm. There the new arrivals had to go through a large gate guarded by the 3-headed, snake-tailed monster Cerberus. Though loosely described as a dog, this creature was born of the union between a giant snake man, Typhoon, and the man-eating serpent maiden, Echidna. Cerberus turned this same ferocity on those who attempted to escape. Charon and Cerberus were not the only non-human residents of Hades. Nyx, the goddess of night, lived there, as did Hieronymus, a flesh-eating demon, and the goddess Hecate. The Furies served Hades as his torturers, while Tartarus was both a deity and the pit where Titans were punished. Hellish punishments. Some souls faced hideous torments in Hades. The crimes of Tantalus, a Phrygian ruler, were twofold. To test the gods, he had cooked and served up his son in a banquet he was hosting for them. And as the guest at Zeus's table, he had tried to steal nectar and ambrosia, which would make him immortal, to take back with him to earth. For this he was imprisoned in Hades, racked him with thirst and hunger, surrounded by a pool of water, and with fruit-laden branches that dangled inches from his face. When he leaned over to taste either the water or the fruit, they withdrew from his search, driving him into a frenzy. Sisyphus, king of Corinth, had tricked Hades into thinking that he had been taken to the underworld prematurely, and managed to get himself returned to earth. As punishment, he was sentenced to push an enormous boulder up a hill. Each time he got to the top, the stone rolled back down to the bottom, and he had to start all over again and again and again for the rest of all time. The Greek afterlife. Hades was not the only realm of the dead. According to the ancient writers, fallen heroes and the most virtuous were sent to the Elysian fields, paradisical islands where they could live in bliss. Neither Hades nor Elysium, however, were representative of the ancient Greek view of the afterlife. Stories about Elysium or the punishment of Sisyphus were isolated tales. There is no sense that the ancient Greeks as a whole believed in a systematic judgment of the dead. Continuing with the Hades adventures. He spilled a pomegranate sweet as honey into her hand, the abduction of Persephone. One of classical Greece's Homeric hymns refers to Demeter as the sacred goddess with the glorious hair. Her thick and lustrous golden tresses were emblematic to the abundance of the harvest. Demeter was the goddess of the harvest, charged with ensuring that the fields were rich and fertile. Before tragedy struck, there was no winter, cold, or decay. Stolen away. One day, Demeter's beloved daughter Persephone was out with some nymphs on one of Sicily's prettiest valleys. Picking flowers, Persephone marveled at the roses, crocuses, lovely violets, irises, hyacinths, and narcissi, exulting in the beautiful colors and heady fragrances of the sea. When Persephone pulled a narcissus from the ground, the earth split and opened up beneath her. A huge chariot thundered forth, drawn by sable-black horses. As her companions fled, Persephone stood transfixed. A tall, shadowy figure leaned down from the chariot and scooped her up. Persephone's uncle, Hades, had come up from the underworld to take her as his bride. Persephone struggled and wept, crying out for her father Zeus, but her pleas went unanswered. Some versions of the myth suggest that Zeus himself had played a part in the abduction by conspiring with his brother. Hades took Persephone with him down into the gloomy underworld. He promised that she would be a queen of his subterranean kingdom, revered and beloved by all, but she was inconsolable. Demeter's despair. Persephone's mother, Demeter, was equally distraught. Frantically combing the forest, fields, and hills in search of her daughter, she called out Persephone's name over and over again, but received no reply. In her grief, Demeter blighted the countryside, causing the crops to die and all the leaves to turn brown. It seemed as if the entire earth had died. Eventually, the sun god Helios told Demeter that her brother Hades had snatched her daughter and spirited her off to his dismal realm. At these news, Demeter was filled with rage and wrought yet more destruction upon the earth. Hades' abduction of Persephone had set all of creation askew. At last, Zeus was forced to intervene in the quarrel between his siblings. He ruled that so long as Persephone had not taken food or drink since her arrival into the underworld, Hades must agree to release her. A seasonal solution. Unfortunately, Persephone had eaten something in the underworld. Hades has given her a pomegranate, the fruit of the dead, and she had consumed several of the sweet seeds. This resulted in a fresh judgment from Zeus, who decided that Persephone could return to the world above, but she would have to go back down to the underworld and reside with Hades for 3 months of every year. Persephone's sentence explained why, with the onset of winter, the world appears to fade and die as Demeter mourns her daughter's absence. Then, as spring approaches and Persephone returns to the surface of the earth, its fields and forests once again come into bloom. Okay, I think that we have 2 more chapters that are not love story related. The Greek section of this book is enormous, so I feel like it is fair to divide it in 3 sections or 3 different videos. So yes, I think that I'm gonna read these last 2 chapters that are not, again, love stories. and then leave the love stories for another day. A bringer of dreams. Hermes's first day. Hermes, generally described as the messenger of the gods, was that and much more. Famously, he was able to flit from one place to another in an instant, carried through the air of winged sandals that would become emblematic to the god himself. His ability to fly was key to his role as courier. Symbolically, though, the god's rapid travel suggested his quickness of thought and his heedlessness of the normal restriction of time and space, springing into life. Hermes was the son of Zeus and Maia, daughter of the Titan Atlas and the sea nymph Pleione. Known to the Romans as Mercury, he showed his mercurial character from the very beginning of his life, when, according to the Homeric hymn to Hermes, he jumped straight from his mother's womb and landed in his cradle. The young god did not lie there long, but instead leapt out of the cave that had been his mother's refuge. Despite being only 1 hour old, to find and steal the cattle of the sun god Apollo. Hermes had barely stepped outside the cave when he was diverted by the sign of a tortoise. Scooping out the animal, he turned the hollow shell into a sinker. He covered the opening with cowhide, leaving a sounding hole. He then stretched strings across it and built a little wooden bridge to make a world's first lyre. Plucking the strings, he burst into song, recounting epic stories of the world and its creation, of titans, Olympians, nymphs, men and women, and other beings. Multifaceted god. Not yet a day old, Hermes was already a world's first musician, poet, and historian. His multifaceted genius was also capricious. The Homer hymn states that even as he sang, he was inwardly attending to other matters. As Apollo's sun went down, Hermes crept onto the lands of the god and took his cattle, walking the beasts backwards so their trail seemed to lead into the opposite direction. He headed them back to his home. The quick cunning displayed by Hermes had much in common with trickster spirits of other mythologies, such as West Africa's Anansi or the Loki of Norse legends. Despite his love of pranks, Hermes also possessed a capacity for more serious deeds. For example, he is held to have invented the ritual sacrifice when he slew 2 Apollo's cows, skinned and roasted them, and, hungry though he was, left the aromatic flesh on a platform to atone for his theft. The caduceus, the rod that Hermes carries in his hand, could confer sleep and healing at a touch. The 2 symmetrically coiling serpents that would around the caduceus suggested its ability to balance and reconcile opposing sides, whether through changing them from one form to another or through negotiating and trade. Hermes was also believed to be the god of commerce. And the last chapter is Athena presents the olive tree, Poseidon the wave, the fountain of Athens. The Homeric hymn to Athena begins with the words, "Of Athena, guardian of the city, I sing." No other Greek deity was so closely identified with a particular location, nor does any other location loom so large in our modern-day reception of Greek culture. When we think of ancient Greece, its literature, its art, its democracy, we are thinking largely of ancient Athens. The mythological associations of Athens with the goddess of wisdom are reflected in its reputation as a cultural and intellectual haven, full of philosophers, artists, and playwrights. This dazzling legacy arose from the solid foundations of trade and industry, as the prosperity, confidence, and technical expertise of these people came together to make the city grow and prosper. Work and pleasure. One foundation myth makes this connection between beauty and technology explicit, linking the beginning of Athens with the craftsman god Hephaestus. Lame and ugly though he was, Hephaestus was married to the lovely Aphrodite. This union was symbolically suggestive of a marriage of utility and beauty, of work and pleasure that was prevalent in Greek culture. However, in common with other Olympian marriages, their union also featured frequent infidelities. A son is born. At one point, Aphrodite deserted her husband entirely for the war god Ares. After she left, Hephaestus fell passionately in love with Athena, then pursued her and attempted to rape her. Athena put up a furious resistance and pushed Hephaestus away just as he ejaculated. His semen struck Athena's thigh, and she bursted it off disdainfully. It landed in a Greek soil, and there produced a new life. In some retellings, this offspring was Aristonius, born of the very soil, who would go on to found the city of Athens. By land and sea. Athena played a central role in another of the city's foundation myths. When Aristonius was establishing his community on the coast of Attica, he called on the gods for the divine patron to come forward. With Athena and Poseidon both eagerly desiring the role, a contest was arranged to see what each deity could offer to the future city and its people. Its victor would be decided, fittingly for the birthplace of democracy, by a vote. In the contest, Poseidon shook the earth, smiting it with his trident and making a vast wave come rolling forth. This was a bounteous spring, but its waters salty. In response, Athena then poked the ground, which produced an olive tree, laden with its abundant and valuable fruit. The goddess of wisdom was confirmed by Cecrops, king of the city, as the people's choice. However, Poseidon's gift ensured that the seaport status of Athens was as important to its prosperity as its fertile fields and groves. Look kindly on those who make their way in ships, says the Homeric hymn of Poseidon. The sea god remain in the city's prayers. Aeneas, founder of Rome. The Trojan prince, Aeneas, the son of the mortal Anchises and the goddess Venus or Aphrodite, first featured in Homer's Iliad, but was elevated to the role of founding father of Rome in Virgil's powerful epic, the Aeneid. His story begins at the end of the Trojan War. Aeneas was forced to flee Troy when the city fell to the Greeks. The Aeneid describes Aeneas' subsequent voyage to Italy, beset with drama and misfortune. So we're starting right away with some drama. Let's see what it is. Escape from Troy. The poem begins with Aeneas storm-bound in Carthage, telling the queen about the events that had led to his flight from Troy. He explained how the Trojans had been duped by a giant wooden horse that the Greeks had left outside Troy. The Trojans brought in within the city walls, unaware that Greek warriors hid inside. That night they crept out and opened the city gates to the rest of the Greek forces who destroyed Troy. Aeneas initially joined the fight, but his slain cousin Hector called on him in a dream to found a new Trojan city. His mother Venus also urged him to flee and take his family, Troy's sacred relics, and the household gods with him. Aeneas escaped with his son Ascanius and his father Anchises, but his wife Creusa became separated from the group. When he went back, Aeneas found only her ghost, who told him he was destined to find a new city in Italy. Fleeing by sea, Aeneas and his followers went to Thrace and then Delos, where Apollo, the god of prophecy, advised him to seek the land of his ancestors. Aeneas therefore sailed to Crete, home of the Trojan ancestor Teucrus. But he was directed by the gods in a vision to go instead to Italy, home of his ancestor Dardanus. Next, Aeneas met with the Harpies, fierce female-faced bird creatures. One cursed Aeneas, professing that he would reach his goal only when dire hunger forced the group to eat their tables. They sailed to Sicily, where Aeneas's elderly father died, and then set off for Italy. But the wind god Aeolus, by order of Juno, who hated the Trojans, sent their ships widely off course. Taking shelter in the North African city of Carthage, Aeneas met the queen, Dido. It was to her that he told the story of his flight from Troy. Encouraged by Venus, Aeneas and Dido fell in love and consummated their passion in a cave during a storm. When Jupiter, king of the gods, heard of this, he sent his messenger Mercury to remind Aeneas to leave Carthage to found a new city. The tragic queen. On hearing of her love's departures, Dido asked her sister Anna to build a sacrificial pyre and threw herself upon it. My gosh, we are starting with the drama already. From the flames, she could see Aeneas' ships leaving, so the queen thrust his sword through her body. To end her agony, Juno sent Iris, the rainbow, down to earth to release her soul by snipping a lock of Dido's hair as an offering to Dis, ruler of the underworld. As Aeneas sailed away from Carthage, he looked back and saw the smoke of the funeral pyre. He did not learn of Dido's suicide until later, when he met her shade in the underworld. Aeneas seeks his father. Returning to Sicily, Aeneas held funeral games to commemorate his dead father, Anchises. Meanwhile, Juno, still bearing her ancient grudge and anxious to delay Aeneas's quest, inspired the Trojan women to set fire to the ships. Jupiter sent down torrential rain to extinguish the flames, and in a vision Anchises urged Aeneas to pursue his quest and to meet him in the underworld. Aeneas sailed on, and despite the loss of his helmsman Palinurus, who fell overboard, finally reached Italy. Anxious to see his dead father again, Aeneas was advised by the Sibyl of Cumae to pluck a golden bow to give to Proserpina, queen of the underworld and wife of Dis. The bow ensured them safe passage with the ferryman Charon, across the river Styx. The Sibyl then sedated the guard dog Cerberus with a drugged honey cake. In the underworld, Aeneas spoke to the ghost of Dido, but she turned away from him without a word. Anchises was overjoyed to see his son, however, and stretched out his arms. Aeneas tried in vain to embrace his father, but his arms closed on empty air. Then, as they walked with the Sibyl beside the river Lethe, Anchises prophesied the founding of Rome. To further impress on his son the importance of his mission, Anchises showed him a parade of the spirits of the great Romans who would be born, including Romulus, Julius Caesar, and Augustus. Aeneas then returned to the world of light, the promised land. I have a question. Wasn't there someone living in Italy already when this whole shebang happened? Did they consider that land belongs to maybe someone else? I don't know. Just say. The promised land. As they sailed up the west coast of Italy towards the river Tiber, Aeneas and his followers skirted the island of the enchantress Circe, daughter of the sun. There they heard the howls and cries of men whom she had turned into wild animals, lions, boars, bears, and wolves. The sea god Neptune sent them favorable winds that took them safely away. I like this Circe girl already. The Trojans landed in Latium at the Tiber's mouth and laid out their first meal on platters of crusty bread, piling them high with freshly harvested fruit and vegetables. They were so ravenous that they ate not only the meal but the bread plates too. Aeneas' son, Ascanius, yes, joked that they were even eating at the tables. The prediction from before. Realizing that this fulfilled the Harpies' prophetic curse, Aeneas and his followers knew they had found the place to build their city, and Jupiter thundered 3 times in confirmation. Aeneas did not plan to conquer Latium with a hostile invasion. Instead, he paid court to Lavinia, the daughter of King Latius, who was said to be the son of god Faunus. Once again, however, the enmity of Juno worked against him. The goddess pursued Lavina's mother, Queen Amata, that her daughter must marry Turnus, ruler of the neighboring Rutuli. Okay? Juno then called on Alecto, one of the 3 Furies, or goddesses of retribution, to foment war. The final conflict. Vastly outnumbered by Turnus's forces, Aeneas initially despaired, but was then visited by the river god Tiberinus in a dream. The god told him that he should find a place on the river bank where a white sow was nursing 30 piglets. There his son Ascanius would one day found a city called Alba Longa. Encouraged by Tiberinus, Aeneas then gained the support of the aged Evander, king of Palanteum, on the Palatine Hill, where Rome would later be founded, and of Tarchon, the king of the Etruscans. With new allies and help from the gods, Aeneas began to gain ground. When the enemy tried to set fire to the Trojan fleet, the goddess Cybele turned the ships into nymphs who swam away. However, Turnus had Juno on his side and killed King Evander's son Pallas, taking his belt as a trophy. Finally, Aeneas and Turnus met in a single combat. Venus supported Aeneas, while Turnus had his sister, the water nymph Juturna, at his side. Jupiter then persuaded Juno to abandon Turnus and cease her opposition to Aeneas, assuring her that the Latin name Latium and language would be preserved. Jupiter then sent a snake-haired fury to drive off Juturna and harry Turnus. I feel like I'm reading words that I have never seen in my life. Okay. Aeneas wounded Turnus, but was about to spare his life until he saw that he was wearing Pallas's belt. In fury, he drew his sword through Turnus's heart. The epic poem ends in Turnus's death, which also ended the war. So we have here the start of Rome. And the timeline is Aeneas flees Troy because Greek have sneakily won the war. Not sneakily, I mean, I guess you gotta work smart, not hard, right? Sometimes. So Aeneas flees Troy with his father Anchises after his wife's ghost tells him he must find a land of the Tiber. In Delos, Aeneas offers sacrifices to Apollo, but misunderstands clues about the site of his future city. In Crete, Aeneas has a vision in which the gods tell him to travel to Italy. The Harpies attack Aeneas after he is blown off course to their home on the Strophades Islands. In love with Dido, queen of Carthage, Aeneas only leaves her when the gods remind him of his fate. Yeah, he had a hallucination and left her behind. Like seriously, she is a queen. She was a queen already. Can he have stayed in Carthage and be a king with her? No? In Sicily, Aeneas performs funeral games following the death of his father, Anchises. The Sibyl of Cumae leads Aeneas to the underworld, where he talks to several spirits, including Dido and Anchises. He did not talk to Dido. She did not talk to him back. The future of Rome is revealed to him. Dun, dun, dun. Landing in Latium, Aeneas is welcomed at the mouth of the river Tiber by King Latinus, who offers his daughter Lavinia in marriage. The Trojans go to war in Italy. Aeneas initially sustains heavy losses before enlisting King Evander and his people as allies. In a duel with Turnus, Aeneas is the victor, and it ends the war. New cities. Aeneas founded the city of Lavinium in Latium and named it for his wife Lavinia. After Aeneas' death, his son Ascanius founded the city of Alba Longa, at the spot prophesied by the river god Tiberinus, in the Alban hills southeast of Rome. For 400 years, the descendants of Aeneas ruled Alba Longa until Romulus and Remus founded Rome. According to legend, war began. The war between the two cities broke out in the 7th century BC. Livy described how two pairs of triplets, the Horatii of Rome and the Curiatii of Alba Longa, did battle. The Romans emerged victorious. Historically, the Romans and the people of Latium were part of a confederation known as Latin League, which fought together against enemies. When the Albans deserted the Romans in a war against the Etruscans, the Romans killed the Alban leader Metius, razed Alba Longa to the ground, and brought in people to Rome. Excuse me, but that means that the whole Aeneas's journey was in vain, because again, then the city that he fought for and that his son founded was destroyed. Am I right? Or am I right? So far, we are not hearing, we are hearing a lot of new names, right? But taking into the account actual gods, feels like all the same, just different name. Anyway, but let's continue. A desire seized Romulus and Remus to build a city, the founding of Rome. The myth of the brothers Romulus and Remus was not the only story of the founding of Rome, but it became the widely accepted one. Early accounts claimed that the twins were the sons of the Trojan hero Aeneas, but most versions set the story 15 generations later. Aeneas' son Ascanius founded the ancient city of Alba Longa, about 19 kilometers or 12 miles away from the site that was later to become Rome. Centuries later, Alba Longa was inherited by the two brothers, Amulius and Numitor. Amulius suggested to his brother that they divide their inheritance into cities, taking the reins of the kingdom and the other treasures brought by their ancestor Aeneas from Troy. Numitor agreed and chose the kingdom, while Amulius took the treasure. But with the wealth brought by that treasure, Amulius schemed against his brother and deposed and imprisoned him. Great. Birth of the twins. Fearing a challenge from any descendants of Numitor, Amulius killed Numitor's son, Aegisthus, and forced his daughter Rhea Silvia to become a Vestal virgin. According to most accounts, Mars, the god of war, seduced her as she lay sleeping on a riverbank or in a sacred grove, telling her that she would bear 2 sons, who would exceed all men in bravery. Other accounts said that the true father was a masked Amulius himself. When her twin, but wasn't she Amulius's daughter? Gosh. Anyway, when her twin children Romulus and Remus were born, Rhea Silvia was either put to death for breaking her virginal vows or locked up for life. As for the babies, Amulius ordered a servant to drown them in the river Tiber. What? Instead, the servant cast them adrift in a basket, and then the river god brought them safely to the bank. A female wolf who had just whelped found the babies and suckled them to health. They were then discovered by Faustus, a shepherd, or in some accounts a swineherd or cowherd, who brought up the children with the help of his wife, Larentia. According to some sources, the story of the she-wolf came about because Larentia had been a lupa, a Latin slang word for a prostitute that also meant wolf. It's very small, but I feel like it's a famous statue of the wolf feeding the Rome is founded. The boys grew handsome and strong. Famous for their feats of courage and generosity, they became leaders among the local farmers and huntsmen. When Romulus and Remus were grown men, they learned of their history from either Faustus or Mars, and launched a revolt. The usurper Amulius was killed, and King Numitor was restored to his throne. I thought it was the other way around, that Numitor was the overthrown one. I mean, the one... Anyway, nobody cares. The twins then decided to found a great city of their own. They declared that, in obedience to an oracle from Delphi, their city would be the sanctuary of the god of Asylum, and they gathered around them a great band of fugitives, outlaws, and runaway slaves. When it came to choosing the exact site of the city, Romulus preferred the Palatine Hill and Remus the Aventine Hill. To determine the site and which of them would be the city's first ruler, they agreed to seek a sign from the gods by observing the birds of omen. Romulus, in contrast to his brother, carried a crooked staff known as a litus, used by diviners to interpret future events by studying the flight of birds. This marked Romulus out symbolically as more conscientious than his brother, and therefore the more deserving of victory. When Remus saw 6 vultures, he claimed the gods favored him. Romulus then saw 12 vultures, though, accordingly to Dionysius's account, Romulus was trying to dupe Remus and hadn't seen any birds at all. Liar. The followers of each brother pronounced their respective champion as king. When Romulus started to plow a furrow to mark the city's boundary, an argument arose that quickly got out of hand. Remus jeered his brother and mocked him by jumping over the furrow, at which point Romulus, or some say his follower Celer, killed him. Romulus then founded the city of Rome in 753 BCE. It could not go without, killing everyone. Why can't, I'm just gonna say it in one phrase, why can't men talk things out? The end. The Sabine women. The Sabine women. The tale of Rome's initial foundation emphasizes the warlike nature of Romulus, inherited from his war godfather, and has a brutal theme that would come to define the Roman Empire expansion from centuries to come. On the Palatine Hill, as soon as Rome was built, Romulus placed all his men in legions to defend against surrounding people such as Sabine. Oh my gosh. The first problem facing the new city was the lack of women. For the refugees and outlaws attracted by Romulus and Remus were all men. I question why. To solve this, Romulus announced that he had discovered the altar of the harvest god Consus beneath the city and institute a festival, the Consualia. Oh my gosh, I see here a painting and the title. And I am hating it already. Consualia, in the god's honor. He invited the Sabines to the festival, but while the Sabine men watched the chariot races, Romulus gave a signal, throwing his cloak over his shoulder, and with this his men took up arms. They seized the Sabine women, carrying them over the threshold of their houses and claiming them as their wives. You may understand that claiming is really another word for graping without G. Very nice indeed. Pathetic. War and reconciliation. Hoodwinked and humiliated, the Sabine men resolved to wage war against the Romans. After Romulus killed the Sabine king Acron, the Sabines united under Titus Statius and laid siege to Rome. Tarpeia, the daughter of the commander of Rome's citadel, betrayed the city. In exchange for the Sabines' gold armlets, she opened the gates and let in the foreign army. I mean, excuse me, what did you expect? What did you expect? She did well. You deserve that. During the bloody fight that followed, Romulus was knocked down by a stone thrown at his head. The Romans began to retreat, rallying only when Romulus rose and prayed to Jupiter Stator, the stayer, for help. The battle was halted by the Sabine women, who ran between the two armies and begged their Sabine fathers and Roman husbands not to kill each other. Seriously. Peace was then made between the two sides under the joint leadership of Romulus and Tatius. Romulus ruled Rome for 40 years, establishing it as a mighty city. Many stories were told of his superior strength. In one display of power, Romulus stood on the Aventine hill and hurled his spear into the earth. It sank so deep that no man could pull it out. The shaft was made of hard cornel wood, and the tree that grew from it was treated with great reverence. In the time of Gaius Caesar, who reigned from 27 BCE to 14 CE, the roots of Romulus's cornel tree were inadvertently cut by workmen repairing some nearby steps, and the tree withered and died. Great. The city of Rome grew in power and prestige, but not without conflict. When ambassadors from the city of Laurentum were murdered by Tatius' kinsmen, Tatius was slain in revenge. A plague afflicted both Rome and Laurentum, as both sides were seen to be at fault in not pursuing justice for their murderers. Taking advantage of the plague, the people of Cameria attacked Rome, but Romulus defeated them, taking the city and half of its inhabitants. Ascension. One day, when Romulus was mustering his troops in a field of Mars, a storm arose. The air rang with peals? P-E-A-L-S, peals of thunder. And Romulus was wrapped in cloud and carried up to heaven. in the chariot of his father Mars to become a god himself. Thereafter, Romulus was worshipped under the name of Quirinus, the Sabine god of war. But he was not Sabine. The next king after Romulus, Numa Pompilius, was a Sabine, showing that the union of the two people lasted beyond the reigns of Romulus and Tatius. I think I'm going to read one more chapter, and it seems like all the next chapters are mostly love stories between, gods and mortals and whatnot. A few of those I already went through, actually. So if you'd like to hear about them, you can maybe watch my Greek goddess video. But the last chapter that I'm going to read is The Father of Gods spurts red flames through the clouds. Numa outwits Jupiter. When angry Jupiter sent lightning flaming from the sky with torrents of rain, King Numa, the second king of Rome, was alarmed. However, his wife, the nymph Aegedia, told him, "You must appease Jupiter and deflect his anger. Seek out Picus and his son Faunus, gods of the Roman soil, for they know how it can be done." These woodland gods could be found on the Aventine Hill, which was then a pastoral place of springs and wells, and not yet part of the city. Numa mixed wine and honey with water in the spring, where the two gods drank. When they fell asleep, Numa bound their hands tight with ropes, because nothing entails more trust than tying someone up. Upon awakening, Picus and Faunus tried to escape, but changing from one fantastical shape to another, they could not free themselves from Numa's bonds. Numa told them he meant no harm, of course. He simply wanted to learn how to appease Jupiter. The gods, while unable to offer this knowledge, were willing to bring Jupiter to him. "You ask what is not lawful for a man to know. Release us, and we will lure Jupiter down from the sky." Man versus God. Jupiter descended as promised, the earth sinking beneath his weight. Numa was so afraid that his face drained of blood and his hair stood on end. But he entreated the god, "King of heaven, call back your thunderbolts, I pray. Tell me what offering you desire." Jupiter replied, "Cut off the head of an onion," answered Numa, quick as a flash. "A man's," said Jupiter. "Hair," Numa cut in. "The life of a spread." At this, Jupiter roared with laughter. It delighted him to meet a mortal fit to conversate with a god, despite only possessing human faculties. Numa's quick wits were a match for his own. Jupiter then told Numa, "When Apollo is at his highest point in the sky tomorrow, I will send you signs of empire." With these last words, Jupiter rose again into the sky with loud claps of thunder, leaving the awed Numa on the hillside. When Numa returned to the city in high spirits, the citizens were reluctant to believe his story. "Actions speak louder than words," he said. "Let us gather tomorrow and see what omens Jupiter will send." The next morning, the people of Rome came to Numa's door. The king sat among them on his throne, and they watched Apollo rise into the sky and travel across it. When the sun reached its zenith, Numa raised his hands to the sky and said, "The time has come, Jupiter, to fulfill your vow." Omnipotent Jupiter. Jupiter answered King Numa from heaven by hurling 3 thunderbolts. Then a shield fell out of the sky, and a voice declared that so long as the shield was preserved, Rome would rule the world. Willy Numa asked the craftsman Mamurius to make 11 more shields exactly like it, to confuse any would-be thief. These 12 sacred objects were kept in the Temple of Mars, in a care of the dancing priest, the Sali. Roman Trinity. The Capitoline Triad of Jupiter, his wife Juno, and his daughter Minerva shared a temple on a Capitoline hill in Rome, known as the Temple of Jupiter. They were regarded as the ruling gods of Rome. This trio of supreme gods succeeded an earlier triad, known to scholars as the Archaic Triad, which consisted of the gods Jupiter, Mars, and Quirinus. Both triads were central to the public religion of ancient Rome. Capitolia temples were built across Italy and the provinces. In them, Jupiter was revered as Jupiter Optimus Maximus. My name is Jupiter Optimus Maximus. My name is Jeff. Jupiter, best and the greatest. Alongside Juno, his queen, and Minerva, the goddess of war. The Temple of Jupiter was regarded as one of the most important of all temples in ancient Rome. Within its walls lay the Jupiter stone, which was used by political officials to swear oaths. Its Latin name, Jupiter Lapis, became the title for a cult that came to regard the stone itself as a god. So there we have